Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Respect to all of the Theras and Mahatheras and Sangha members here today. Luang Cha, and recollection of Luang Cha. Overwhelming feeling for me today is one of deep gratitude, just a profound gratitude for everything that has been a manifestation of this one person's life. Sometimes it's easy to feel like our lives are just insignificant, small, we don't really matter. But you see, one person, just one person dedicating themselves with persistence and wholesome intention, and it was amazing. It was really amazing the effect that this one person, Luang Cha, has had on the world. So we're here to commemorate 100 years since Luang Cha's birth. 100 years ago. 100 years ago in Europe, they were recovering from this horrible war. A whole generation of young men died, mostly uselessly, and followed by poverty and depression, and then an even more horrific war. Meanwhile, in Thailand, they were experiencing the greatest proliferation of Buddhist meditation masters at the time. Luang Cha, his teachers, Luang Man, Luang Kinari, his many contemporaries, we call Kruba Ajahns. Together they formed the greatest collection of Buddhist teachers and our enlightened masters on the planet at that time. And I think even equally as important, they left behind this legacy of a training of very high standard, so that tens of thousands of others, people who were also dedicated, could follow in their footsteps. So in the last 70 years, the peace and prosperity it's always been on the rise, generally been on the rise in the world, and yet somehow we still manage to experience dukkha. Once you have a roof over your head, once you have good food, once you have the basic necessities of life, then theoretically you have everything you need to be happy, and yet somehow we still seem to fall short of this potential that humans have for perfect contentment. Now, why is that? Like the seeds of true happiness just haven't been planted, they haven't been watered. So what is this word happiness? We talk about Nibbana as the highest happiness. How do we define happiness? What does this even mean? Fun, laughter, getting what you want, gratifying desires, peace, security, financial security, right? Contentment, but how do we define those? And what are the true causes of peace and contentment? Or even freedom. When we talk about freedom, what are the true causes of freedom? When we talk about freedom, what is it that we're actually free from? When I originally was considering ordaining, it wasn't because I was unhappy. It wasn't because at the time that I considered myself unhappy. Things were actually going very well. I graduated from college, my family was happy, good friendships and relationships. Everything was actually going very well. It was easy to get a job, I could travel around the world, I had the freedom to travel around the world, and yet still, somehow, there seemed to be this gut feeling that there was so much more possible, right? That somehow we're just not attaining the potential, the human potential. And then one day I saw a photograph of a Buddhist monk, and it was like, in the depth of my mind, someone hit a gong. It was like, boom. And I thought, well, I should really pay attention to that. And later on, I was staying at a Buddhist center, and Ajahn Chah's first English book came out. It was someone who wrote a collection of Ajahn Chah's teachings, but it described the lifestyle. And as soon as I read that, I thought, wow, now that's something. And then I made my way to Thailand. And when I first met some of these senior monks, many of whom are here this weekend, I thought, now there's an example to follow, an example of real integrity. Remember the first morning I walked into Wat Ba Nana Chat. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning, and these monks were pulling water out of a well with big cans. And I went up to one monk, and he was carrying these couple cans of water on a bamboo pole. He was about 40 years old. I said, where might I find the abbot? He said, I'm the abbot. I said, oh, cool. That was my introduction to Ajahn Pasano. And it just got better from there. Within a few months, I was in Anagarika, and we were on our first trip into Dowdam, this remote jungle. And at that time, nothing was built. There were no kutis, no diens, nothing. It seemed like no paths even. It was just a wild jungle full of wildlife, and I was there as an Anagarika with all these monks, and it was just the most inspiring time that I had ever had. I mean, you had these wonderful examples of people dedicating themselves to the practice. You're living in a jungle. It was this great adventure surrounded by wild animals. It seemed like it could have been the time of the Buddha. I was only in Anagarika, but I was already in bhikkhu heaven. So I found that the forest tradition then offered this systematic way to understand ourselves and purify our hearts. I mean, in the beginning, our minds are a mess. It's just the way it is. You know, we're just like fish swimming in this water of moods and thoughts and emotions, and it's very difficult to see, very difficult to get an objective perspective on it, because we're just immersed in it. Gradually, with meditation and the whole lifestyle and the practice, and you start to get a bit of perspective, at least enough to see that, wow, my mind's really out of control. And then gradually, with persistence, you get a bit of distance, and you are able to see thoughts merely as thoughts, and moods simply arising and passing away. And then you start to gradually get a sense of the silence, in between thoughts, the silence around the mind, the silence of the mind, the spaciousness of the mind. And then that begins to grow, and then that becomes normal. And then within that, it's like you have a sphere of silence around you, and then a thought arises, or a mood arises, or defilement arises, or even a wholesome thought arises, and you can see it and you recognize it. So then you can take this further and further. The mind becomes brighter and brighter, but it's this state of being solid and peaceful and still, but still seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and cognizing. Gradually wear away defilements day after day, day in and day out. So mastering meditation was a very important part of Luang Por Chah's training, but by no means was it the only part of his training. There was no Luang Por Chah meditation technique. I mean, his technique was much more broad than that. So approaching it with the right attitude and just practicing in daily life. How do we approach everything in daily life? How finding opportunities from the time we wake up in the morning until the time we go to bed at night to how can I challenge my defilements, right? Once the mind is peaceful and stable to whatever extent we're able to manage, then we start to question, who is this that I identify with? All the things that we create an identity around, start to challenge that, all these assumptions. My car, my house, my mother, my father, my children, right? We create an identity over and over again with nearly everything we do. My body, my feelings, my emotions, my opinions, right? On and on and on. My. And we really start to take a look at that, and in what real way are these things ours? So the delusion around the sense of self is gradually undermined, not just through a meditation practice, but through everything we do in daily life. That was one of the great legacies of Luang Por Chah, was this emphasis on training in everyday life. Sometimes people think monks that don't have daily life, I don't know how they visualize monastic life, but they think, they leave the monastery, okay, I'm going back to the real world now and practicing in daily life. Well, we have daily life too. And we have to practice with that. We have to learn how not just to meditate while we're sitting cross-legged with our eyes closed, but then to extend that into walking meditation with our eyes open. Potential for distraction is so much greater, and then extend it into other activities throughout the day. I mean, you take eating, for example, right? Once you've done sitting meditation, walking meditation, you learn how to do eating meditation. Eating meditation is a very popular form of meditation, but not many people do it very well. So eating meditation, for example, tomorrow when you go down, you see all these tables laden full of food. At that point, it's just shape and color and perception, right? You haven't even tasted anything yet. And already, well, what does the mind do, right? Already, okay, that's part of the meditation practice. We're starting to meditate. You're just seeing a table full of food. All right, this is the beginning of the meditation. What does that bring up? What perceptions does that bring up? Perceptions based on a memory which is happening in the present, based on some past experience. Right? Then a perception arises and you think, that looks delicious. You have no idea. You don't know if it's delicious or not. It's just based on a memory which gives rise to a perception. You don't know for sure, but it's based on, okay, that looks delicious. And if it's delicious, it'll give pleasure. And if it gives pleasure, then it's good. That food is good. Right? How quickly, this process gets momentum. If it's good, then I want to hold on to it. How can I keep it going? How can I get more? And we think, oh no, I don't want to be greedy. But really, I want more. So even just how we eat, how we approach eating says so much about us, and we learn so much about how we approach the rest of the things in life. Right? And once you finally take, let's say you take the right amount, not too much, not too little, you sit down. Now, this is your meditation object, right? The monks, of course, we come back and we reflect on our food, and then our bowl full of food is our meditation object during this time. So then before you take your first bite, you can practice like this tomorrow. Before you take your first bite, is there any gratification there? Huh? Is there any expectation there? Huh? And even, what do you take as your first bite? You take your favorite thing? You save your favorite thing to last? Yeah. Or do you just go for whatever is closest? Whatever's nearest, that's all okay, what do I take first? All right, I'll just take what's on top. And then, okay, now, before I put this into my mouth, before I just act blindly, all right, do I expect gratification from this? Okay, yeah, there is some expectation there. All right, put it in your mouth. Then there's this explosion of, especially with the first bite, explosion of sense contact, right? So we pay attention to that. And maybe you're only about a third of the way through chewing that, and then what happens? Are you starting to look for the next bite already? Now wait a minute, you're only a third of the way through the first bite, you still have a lot of chewing to do. There's still a long ways to go there. Right? But so much of life can be like that, where you just pay attention to the exciting part and the first part, and then we don't even pay attention to the middle part and the end. We just keep looking for the exciting part of the new bite. Try to recreate that explosion. So how much of life is like that? I mean, we really learn a lot about ourselves, just how we relate to life through these simple acts of, experiencing the exciting part, the new part of some sensory experience. But then, if you really follow it through, just one bite to completion. The middle part is a bit more boring. By the end, it's like tedious. It's like, come on, let's get this over with. I want the next one. Right? But at least you start to see one part of life in its entirety. Right? Instead of just paying attention to the exciting parts, the gratifying parts, you see one process from beginning to end. So in daily life, there's so many ways to practice. Now in the monastery, we're encouraged not to speak too much. Not necessarily to keep silence, but not to speak too much. And then just the whole practice around speech, when to say something, when not to say something. If you want to express an opinion, when to say it and when not to say it. We have certain standards. Right? Of course, if it's not true, then don't say it. If you know it's not true. But even if it's true, that doesn't necessarily mean it's beneficial to say. So we have these standards, and it's a practice that we can refine through our whole life. Modern daily life practice, computers, talk about dukkha. Now, once you've spent enough time in the jungle, somehow you end up in an office in front of a computer. And you think, well, okay, I'm going to have to learn how to make this into Dhamma practice. Dhamma practice means everything in daily life. So how do I make this into Dhamma practice? Okay, first of all, using the computer, right? Don't lose touch with your body. Basic satipatthana, keep awareness in your body. It's so easy to get sucked into a screen and lose awareness of your body. So try to keep awareness of your body. Paying attention to your posture. And then periodically, just stop. Right? Just stop, close your eyes, and take 3 deep breaths. It only takes about 15 seconds, but that can do so much to help ground us. If you're working in a stressful job and there's a gradual increase in stress, this can help to just cut that down. Just release the stress before it gets too strong. Just periodically stop, close your eyes, and take 3 deep breaths. So this type of daily life practice, right? Luang Por Chah was always encouraging us to practice in different ways and find ways. We could be creative in how we can approach our daily life practice. Still, we would experience obstacles. We always would be experiencing obstacles of some kind. Right? I mean, worry becomes a big obstacle in the mind. Even if everything's perfect, we can still ruin it by worrying. I mean, worry is, it just becomes this habit that dominates some people's lives. And sometimes we confuse it with caring. Caring is one thing, but then we think, oh, if I care, then I have to worry. Well, they're actually 2 different things. You can care. You can care and care about other people without worrying. You can take responsibility for the future without worrying. But how? Right? the habit becomes so strong. And then it's essentially based on fear. Some scenario arises in our mind, some future scenario, and then we, relate to it with aversion or fear. We don't want that to happen, right? And that just becomes a habit that goes on and on. So how do you overcome this? Well, I found what helped me a lot was, for many, many years when I lived in New Zealand, I still live in New Zealand, but especially the early years that I was there, every year I would take 1 month off and go tudong. Tudong with just start in some place in New Zealand, usually quite a long ways away from the monastery, and then I would have 1 month to get back to the monastery. Sometimes alone, sometimes with another monk. And of course we have no money, no car, no vehicle, can't carry food, and no fixed plans. Right? This was the very important one, no fixed plans, so that there wasn't like a series of people that I knew whose houses I would go to, so I was assured of something stable and reliable. No, nothing like that. Every day, you just don't know where you're going to get your food. You don't know where you're going to sleep. And if you're prone to worry, that is no fun at all. You just worry all day long. Where's my next meal going to come from? Right? Where am I going to sleep tonight? You just worry, how am I going to get back to the monastery? Right? So the only way to be at peace and enjoy that is just to learn how to trust. Learn how to trust in the results of the good karma that you're making. If your intentions are pure, then just trust in the results. So I gradually learned how to do that, and then just not worry. Just not worry. It's like, okay, well, if I get food, fine. If I don't get food for a couple of days, I can still be fine. If I have to sleep on the side of the road, that'll be fine. If I have to sleep in a park, that'll be fine. But in the end, I never went hungry. In the end, everything worked out. And not having any fixed plans, things actually worked out better, much, much better than I ever could have planned. So that helped me overcome worry, and then coming back to the monastery, having to make future plans, but still, there was a sense of, you just trust. Trust in your intentions, wholesome intentions and motivations, and the law of karma will take care of the rest. So a bit of adversity doesn't hurt. You always have a bit of adversity on tudong, but when everything is arranged and managed just the way we like it, then it's not so difficult to be at ease. But when that illusion of control begins to fall away and disappear, then it tests our character. So a bit of adversity is not a bad thing. But when everything is going well, it is important to remember and be grateful, just to recognize the good things that are happening in our life. I mean, it's so easy to sometimes focus on the negative, when actually there's a lot of very wonderful things, wonderful people in our life that sometimes we may take for granted. But this is a very fragile situation as well. There's one man staying at our monastery right now. He's a wonderful man, but he's like, Ajahn, what's all this talk about dukkha? Suffering. It's all suffering, suffering. I think my life is great. I'm having a wonderful time. I'm very happy with friendships, and everything's going great. It's going wonderful. Right? Well, what's all this talk about suffering and suffering? So, dukkha, unfortunately, has this reputation of being translated as suffering, but it's so much more than that. Of course, misery and suffering exist in the world, but it's not always that way. Sometimes everything is great. But you know, even when everything is wonderful, even if everything's perfect, you got everything you want, everything's perfect, right? Young, healthy, strong, got friendships, everything's just perfect. Still, there's this little bit of sadness that when you realize that you can't hold on to it, you can't make it last. So that's a dukkha too. And then things happen. You know, things are going great for a while, and then things happen. Things change. We had this one man staying at the monastery recently, and he was so happy. He had this wonderful, actually very wonderful wife. And then she was only in her mid-30s and suddenly diagnosed with lung cancer. But never smoked a day in her life. Within 2 years, she was dead, and he was just left with these young children, kind of devastated. It really took him a long time to work through that. Things happen, even when everything seems to be perfect. Right? One of my cousins, through high school, he was so popular and good-looking. He was just like one of these, seems to have it all, and then in his early 20s, gradually started to get schizophrenia. It's like, wow, things happen. You know? Even my sister, went home to visit about 1.5 years ago. Went home to visit. My sister was strong, full of life, and then within a year, you know, when I went back to visit again, and she'd been diagnosed with cancer, and he was just frail. You couldn't believe how frail. And then shortly died after that. So life is very unpredictable, and this, you know, even when everything is going very, very well, Dhamma practice prepares us, right, for change. Right? You just never know what's going to be coming up. So this Dhamma is really about finding this place of stability in an unstable world, finding a reliability in an unreliable world. Experience enough in life and you just see how unreliable the conditioned world is, and if you're really looking for contentment, then your heart just turns somewhere else. It's still looking for contentment and happiness and peace of mind, but it has to turn somewhere else, and that's where we come in contact with the Dhamma and the Triple Gem. No, we have so many amazing examples, these disciples of Luang Por Chah who are here today. I mean, it's very humbling to be in the presence of so many great teachers, people who I've considered to be my teachers even since I first encountered the forest tradition. So these are very good examples of a life of integrity, and I think as much as anything else, the Sangha that you see here and all the lay practitioners and all the teachings that people are practicing in their daily life, this is Luang Por Chah's legacy. So I offer this for your reflection today.